This is Sheila Baslaw talking with Betty Ballon, and it is July 18th, 2001. Betty, could you tell me about what you remember about your grandparents or your parents?
Well, my mother's parents had a hardwood store on the market. And the grandmother married very young. There was 3 children, and they were the same ages as the daughter's children. Would you believe that? Because she was very young. And my mother was only 4 years old, and her sister was 2 years old when he married a young girl. And the children that came grew up the same time with my mother and her sister. So they were like one family. And they had there were small children in the house, and my grandfather thought that my mother was smarter than just being in the house. So he kept her in the business as little as she was. She went to school and she learned a lot of business. She was always with my grandmother. So she got married. And when she got married, she married a butcher, and there were 2 butchers, like the husband and the grandfather.
This was
The
in Uman.
father-in-law.
This was in Uman.
Yeah. And my mother stood in one butcher shop, and my grandfather stood in the kosher butcher shop. But my father had a contract with the army, used to supply them with meat.
The Russian army.
The Russian army. So he was like an outsider, was always buying and making orders and all that. But my grandfather lived next door. That is my father's father, next door to us. And the 2 houses were the same, but between each house they made a wall, and with 2 cupboards on each side, and they had a lot of outings. Like Saturday night, the buyers used to come to the house and take orders of what they needed for the meat and all that, so they needed a lot of room to open up the houses, full house. And they used to come on horseback. They didn't have a car then. And of course, they had a meal at the house, and there was discussing business. That was Saturday night.
What would they have for a meal?
Good stuff. There was always meat in the house. In the back of the yard, they used to make their own kalbasa, what you call it.
A garden.
Beaners. And they used to take a lot of sheep and open up and take out the guts. And they used to pickle it and put it in the cellar. Years ago, they used to have a dark cellar and keep the food very cold. And used to cut up that, and they made latkes. And there was beer. And they used to make their own bread in the house on Friday night, and cookies and cake and stuff. But it was always somebody just doing it. My mother didn't do that. No, my mother never learned how to cook whenever she came here. She knew business, that's all she knew. And this is the life we led. Mm-hmm. But my grandfather used to look after us schooling and our needs. He had 3 daughters, but they didn't count for anything. But my father was the only son in the family. And they were in business together, so it was his family. We children, my father did not know schooling and all that, just for the winter preserves and stuff like that. He'd go to Odessa twice a year. You couldn't buy things like coming here, coats and dresses, and used to buy trunks full of material and anything that was ready-made. And it'd bring it home. They'd got a dressmaker in the house, and she would be sewing for months, making sheets and pillowcases and underwear and anything we needed. We were the best dressed kids on the block because there was a lot of children. My grandfather was very fond of laser, the firstborn, and he gave him a good education and stuff.
What kind of an education did he get?
He went to technical school, mm-hmm. But he was the oldest. He was about 17, 18 years when the pogrom started, and then everything changed. And at that time, they would take him to the army. So my mother tried to get him out of the country. They got him over to to the Romanian border.
How did they do that?
A lot of bribing, but it got him over. And well, my brother was very good looking. He was very soft-spoken and never would soil his hands, but had a beautiful voice, and he was forever singing. And people just loved him for that. They'd sing for a song and they'd get the best meal and all that stuff. And when they came to Canada, it was the same thing too. There was a mister over here who did not know, he had no profession or anything. So he went to Toronto and he landed in a show. And he was there, but he had a sweetheart from the old country. But she came much later. She went to the States, she had family there. She was one of those that her parents died very, very young. And there was 3 children. She was more like a mother to the 3 children. But when it came to America, they got together, and at that time the Americans and Canadians were not the same. They had to have permission and all that stuff. Anyway, she came for a visit to he had a job in Toronto as a cantor in a shoe. And I liked him a lot, and anyway, the girl came to Canada, and they decided to get married, but not right away because she had brothers and sisters younger than her to look after. So they wouldn't let her come in. So the government said, if she'll come to Canada, the shoe put up $500. That she will go back in a month's time. She'll go back to the States. And this is how it happened. But while she was in Toronto, they got married. And when my father heard that they got married without him being there, it was a terrible thing. So they came to Ottawa and had another wedding. This is how it was. But they lived in Toronto for about 2 years, and then they went to the States because she wanted to go there.
Now, where do you fit into the family?
I'm the 4th in the family.
Uh-huh. And what happened to you?
To me, where do I start?
Just start where you left off.
Well, when they came to Canada, we remained in Romania. And then my father left for Canada, and then my brother Laser left for Canada. And then Morris left for Canada. And we were left in Romania with nothing, because before we did come, crossing the border, everything we owned and everything we had was taken away from us, and we became very penniless. We were another family by an aunt of mine, my father's sister.
What was her name?
Hannah. They lived in the States. And they had 3 children, and they had no grandmother.
So they sent money to you in Romania?
No. We were all in Romania.
Uh-huh. How did you manage, though?
We started to make a living, used to make luxury. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We lived in a house as big as this. And used to make them at night and sell them in the morning. And I still have, from carrying them, a wicker basket. Used to put the luxury and a stand to stand it up. And we're just on the market, like these people now, selling the luxury, from that we lived. Very penniless.
How many were you there?
When we got to Romania, we were 16 people, my aunt and our family. We had nowhere to go, so we landed like they have here. I would say people get together, they have no place to go.
Yeah, like a shelter.
Like a shelter. We got there one day, and they were handing out food, and they had to stand in line, my aunt and my mother. And we're standing in line, and by the time they got to where they were serving the food, there was only 2 prunes left. So my mother and my aunt said, this is the freedom we came to. Let's go to the river, we'll all drown. That's be the end of it. It was very terrible then. You don't do those things. We went in the rent, nobody would rent us a house, we had no money. But there was a lot of people that came from our part and they were living that money coming in from the States. And they were living it up very well because one dollar was worth 200 leis. So for 200 leis went very well. So they lent us some money. We went to rent a house for the two families, but it was impossible. By the end of the town, there was all kinds of curves and all kinds of bad people living there. And we got a place there. We had no Betty. We had no nothing with us. So we got like, they served the horses hay. We got a bundle of that, and we spread it on the floor. And we're 16 people living in one room. And then that time, my father was very bitter and didn't know what to do with himself, but used to have like a place they used to meet like the immigrants.
Where was your father? Was he with you, your father?
Yes, when Romania was with us till they left for Canada. And we used to get together and there was no help because we had no one in the States to verify for us or anything. And we had to do something. Anyway, we survived somehow. We got a separate family. And she was making Lakshmi, my aunt, and my mother was making. We were selling anything and everything we could lay our hands on. And my aunt used to go to the bakery and to the fruitman if he has some damaged fruit. And you know, one time they gave him bread that the rats ran through it. He got it away, and she was obliged to take it because they had no money to buy it with. But then we got a fruit stand somehow, and we survived for 2 years that way. And after my father had gone already, and Rourke was gone, and Laser was gone.
Where did they go?
They went to Canada. These are the two brothers took them across. My father had a very beautiful coat, a winter coat, fur-lined inside. That was something very, very special. So one of the brothers wanted that coat. So he said, I don't know if he used that coat, but it was took my father instead, because they needed a father for the Gazevich family. And then my brother came over because they wanted he should marry sister. But when they came to Canada, there was nothing they could do. They couldn't even survive for themselves. After 2 years, the people that came to Canada, they knew of us, and they said they have to do something for this family because my father was not getting anything. Laser had gone to Canada, to Toronto, and he was working as a husband, not getting very much. And my brother Morris was walking cattle for $4 a week for the longest time. And we had no help of any kind. So they made a meeting what to do. And we went to the Altman, he had a travel agency. He says, how can I do anything? I don't know the people. And one ticket, maybe I could spare, but 5 tickets, no way. It's not only the ticket, you got to have someone to verify for you. And so they decided to go to Mr. Bilski. He had a jewelry store. And that was Mrs. Freeman's father. And they told him the story. He says, what do you want me to do? 5 people to take out it, and to not only to verify their passage is when they come here. You got to, somebody has to vouch for them. They should not need to go to the government. I could not do that, he said. Anyway, they said, if anybody, I don't know what to do. Go to Altman, and he'll send the passages. I will sign for him. I will guarantee that. And the rest, you'll have to see. Anyway, that time they didn't have a telephone for that 80 years ago, but they did have telephones. And they telephoned to the right people in Canada and Romania, and this is how we came. I remember we had to go to Bucharest, it's a big city, where all that took place. And my mother got us up a pair of shoes. She should look presentable. And she took me along. Anyway, the shoes were very tight. She couldn't wear them. So she went barefoot. You walk into the consulate with bare feet. But anyway, looked up this situation and I kind of figured what was going on. Anyway, he called and everything worked out. And we got to Canada.
How many years were you separated from your father and your brothers?
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
2 years. Mm-hmm. But we didn't hear nothing from my father because he had nothing to write us and he was very bitter. And when we came here, he was very upset. But there were good people where they were living in Mr. Dollar's house. When we came, they took us in.
They
Just
took
imagine.
in all 5 of you.
No, and they were a house full of people, their own.
Mm-hmm.
They did not know when they'll get rid of us. But just think of that people take it upon themselves with no education. The most educated people today would not do that. We were there, they fed us and they put us up and they took us getting some clothes and all that bit. You would not believe. To this day, I could never forget. After a couple of weeks, they got us a house. We moved in with nothing. And then my father, about 6 months, we got a little store in a room in the back, and we all landed there. But Mrs. Primo was very wonderful. She looked after people. She used to come and buy a lot of stuff with a chauffeur of parcels. She never used those parcels, but she paid for them. And she gave them to people that needed it.
What, did she give you things?
She came to buy the stuff. She didn't want us to be beggars because we had a roof and we had food, whatever we were selling. He used to sell meat, 2 pounds for a quarter, so there was always going to city, Arras de Hoyt. For 2 pounds for a quarter, she'd get a bone and it'd get something else and all that. And this is how it was. And a few years later, we bought the building, or the shack, what you call it. We built a nice store and a nice house. And then my brother got married, my other brother got married.
So Laser got married, and Morris got married.
Yeah. Morris got married here. Bohr got married in New York. I got married here.
How did you meet your husband?
My husband, in the old country, don't live a house. You live in a courtyard with the front houses. That courtyard had 7 houses, and they lived in one of those houses.
In Oman?
Yeah. His mother and my mother were the best friends, and they lived in the same area. But her husband died. Her husband was 28 years old. And she had nobody being supported or anything. She had 3 children, and an old mother, and a sister, an old maid. They came to Canada. But Jack was only 4 years old when he got here. And we came here many years later.
How old were you when you came?
I was about 14 years. And many years passed by. And my brother Laser was once in Montreal. And he was in a concert. And he spied them. He recognized them because they lived in Montreal. It's a few years later. And this is how we got together.
So your brother Laser arranged for you, the 2 of you, to get together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was young, I was young.
Mm-hmm. How old were you?
I was 19, he was 25. But when he came to this country, he was only 4 years old.
So what was he doing
He wasn't doing very much because he was the youngest. And he was, the mother worked sewing buttons in the soldiers' coats for $18 a week, and for that they lived. No education or anything. And I felt very, because too many things were piled on me, and I figured if I get married, I'd get away from it. So you go from the fire to the frying pan.
What was piled on you?
Uh,
What you said a lot of things were piled on you. What was piled on you?
Well, we lived in a very small house. My mother was in the business, and things were not like I went to school for only 2 years, but there was a lot of things to do at home. There was no hired help of any kind. So everybody had to do what had to be done. I plucked chickens, all the chickens in my life. Stayed in the butcher shop as long as necessary. Kept the house going. It was getting too much. My brother lived in New York already. I said, I have to get away. So anyway, but I worked at Freeman's at the same time. I was getting $12 a week. And anyway, I went and I saved up $150. And I said, I'm going to New York. This is where everything's happened. Well, I got to my aunt on a Saturday morning. And when I got there, so she tells me there's a ball going out from our city. Years ago, they used to get together once a year from different cities. She said, I'd like you to come. I said, well, I've got nothing to wear or this and that. She said, we live here in the shopping center. You can go and get something. So I go out and I buy myself a nice red dress with a nice pair of shoes. And I come to the house, I have no money. I lost my money, or somebody took away my money. This is the first day I come to New York. I went to that evening, I seen a lot of people sing. It was wonderful.
All the people from Uman.
Yeah, the only woman only. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Anyway, I said, I got to get a job. So they told me how to go to the subway, and somehow I'm not stupid, but I'm not very bright either. And New York was very big for me, according to Ottawa. But I said, I got to make it. I went and got myself a job in a piping pit for $12 a week. And my brother says, you'll stay with her, that's all. They had a baby already then, and they lived in a very small apartment themselves. But she had a sister that was old as I am. But she lived in Philadelphia with some relatives. And they said, you'll stay here for the meantime. I had a child already. So I slept in the kitchen. That was okay. But they used to use the kitchen. They had no living room, just had the kitchen and the bedroom. But I had a fire escape in that folding bed. That they are in the cots. Take them in at night and took them out in the morning. Slept there. And then her sister said, if I ever can stay at your place, I don't want to be in Philadelphia. I want to go to New York too. So she came and we stayed together in that kitchen for 6 months. Then my grandfather came from Brooklyn. He was 90 years old at that time.
What was his name?
His name was Ballon.
And his last name?
Sislavsky.
Yeah.
And he had a wife, a fifth one already. Anyway, came to see the daughter and see Lisa, and I was there. And he says to you, your mother's suffering very much. She really needs you back. I don't know what she's doing here. If I were you, you come home. So I went back with him. And then things happened. We got married. And my struggles just started.
Why?
Well, we lived in Montreal for 6 months. And I didn't like, because I was very lonesome for the family. We were not doing very well. I didn't like his family. I didn't like anything in Montreal. One time I came back to Ottawa. It was on a Saturday night. And a woman, Skolsky, was at the house. I don't know why. And I was telling my mother how things, I would like to go back to Ottawa. Things are not so good there. I'm very unhappy. So that woman says, you know, where I'm staying, I have a grocery store. I'm not doing too well, but I'm vacating it. But it's a very good landlord. Maybe the store would be good for you. So on Sunday, I go to see her, and that was, he had a taxi stand on Albert Street. He didn't have no education or anything.
Who is this?
I forget his name. Had a taxi drive.
But this was the landlord?
He was the landlord. Mm-hmm. And I told him the circumstances and everything. He said, try it. You might get there. But he took a liking to me. And he did everything to help me in every way. He called the grocers they should do for me and all that. He helped me, brought me paint to paint the store. And we were very eager and we were very anxious. But what happened, it was in a French district. Nobody spoke English. And I said, what am I going to do? But Jack spoke English. He spoke French. And he could write French because he was raised in Montreal. Nobody spoke English there. I said, what have we got to lose? Got nothing to lose.
Where was that store?
There was 607 St. Patrick's Street. And there was somebody living upstairs. But we had to heat the place. And I never knew how you do it. What you do with a furnace. We got coke then, but I didn't know what to do with it. We piled it up and it went out. So it was always banging. Anyway, he got me somebody to help me. And then I had a child. Then I had two. And it was always at the store. You used to answer the telephone. And
this is your husband?
No, that landlord. Uh-huh. And all the taxi drivers, now they had to call him for if they had any to get a taxi. So he told us you can stop here, but you got to buy something all the time. And this is how we prospered. After I had another child, but my first child wasn't doing too well. And everybody was telling me because it doesn't get enough attention. The house is too cold and all that. And
where were you living at this time?
In the back of the store.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I figured, well, my child's health was more important than the store. We had accumulated a few dollars, and then he said he wanted me to buy the building. And I told him, we have no way of buying it. He says, I want you to have the store. Somehow we got the possession of the store, and we paid under the rent. And then he says, the landlord to me says, it's getting too much for you. Sell the store and take a little rest and do good. It'll be good for the children. And we sold the store, we got $7,000 profit. So I said, well, after a little while, I'll see where I am. So we go to my father's apartment in A Chapel. It was a very famous name. All the strays lived there. Anyway, that's where we were living was a warehouse at one time. And then I made apartments out of it. So the apartment had no doors. There's no cupboards. But it was an apartment. And this is where we lived for a long time. And then when we got into the market, a few years later, things got better.
So where did you live when you were in the market?
We were living on Nelson Street.
Mm-hmm. In an apartment?
It was an apartment. Mm-hmm. There was 32 tenants. Mm-hmm. And maybe in a 5 dwelling apartments. A lot of people there. But we survived, and then we bought a house on Nelson Street. The house that we lived when we first came to Canada was just across the street.
So you came a long way.
Yes.
In how many years?
In a few years, we bought those 4 houses that we first came. And we lived across from Nelson Street for a long time. So, but at that time, my mother just died. And it was a terrible blow, because my father was very helpless. And he took sick, and things were not so great. But by then, I had 4 children by then, and things were a little brighter. I had a house to myself. I had 4 bedrooms, quite a bit of furniture.
This was on Nelson.
Oh, yeah. And I know when we first came from the old country, York Street School was just built then. The Civic Hospital was just built then. You know, Landmark that you live. But right on York Street was built from the iron works, the Ballon house. And one time I was in that house, and I was very, very young, and I said to myself, one day I'd like to live in a house. Anyway, the Ballons decided to sell the house, and he's looking for a job. He'll take their job. He came and we marked down everything of what was done to the house, about the door changed, and this, that. And I figured I can do whatever I wanted. The first time in my life. In the other job, it was $12,000. At that time, that's a long time ago. And we had that $12,000. We say the children are settled. Now was the time of my to have what I wanted. And the store was doing okay in the market yet, and I felt good. We were still young.
What year was that?
That is 17 years later in 39.
So it would have been 1956, around there? 1956, yeah.
Anyway, I go to Laurie, and I felt so prosperous. I want some new furniture. And so he says, one night they came by and says, I want you to come to the house, to the store. That was on Richmond Road. Mm-hmm. One night, and I picked up whatever I wanted, and I can pay you cash. And he said, he's never had a delight customer buy everything at one time. And there she had the kitchen was all in pink, and she had a pink Frigidaire. And Laura says it's not easy to get a color Frigidaire. Buy it from her. So she doesn't want me to have it. She gives it to one of her children, keep it even in the basement. So he said, I'll get you a Frigidaire. There was a large kitchen, and I told him I wanted the best kitchen set you can get. But I don't want one that you took one board. Get me one that's a large one thing. He says, I'm going to Carolina. I'll get you what you want. And I felt that was the richest of ever. And I had the kitchen floor done the way I wanted. And the backyard fixed with the garden done. It was everything so wonderful. And, okay. But there Sheila got married. And she had a lot of problems, like a lot of young girls. She went to the Sydney with one of the boys, and he was very young. And he was going away to the States and she wanted to get married all of a sudden. He was 17, she was 15. And that was a long time before that. Anyway, he went away, and he found another girl, a Shix, and he got married there. And she was very broken-hearted, so she felt it's the end of the world. So she fell in love with one of those guys who shouldn't, and a lot of things happened. Anyway, she went to Toronto. 5 girls got up. One night, they haven't got no Jewish boys in Toronto. They got to go and out of it, they got to go to Toronto. But a few years later, she got a nice boy. And then the wedding here went the best wedding ever. And things were looking up, everything went well. Till Jack started not getting well.
How old was he at that time?
He was at that time about 68.
And what was wrong with him?
Alzheimer's. But his mother had that. And his sister had that. And I knew where my trouble were coming. I wasn't only afraid for Jack, I was afraid what will happen to their children. And, you know, everything took a turn for the worse. And I figured I shouldn't live in a house. There was a duplex upstairs. And the house was very big. I said, I better go where there's a lot of people. I shouldn't be segregated. And then I figured it was telling me to do this, but the children all lived away then. I was alone. And I figured I better go to an apartment where there were people. I shouldn't have to have a lot of obligation to looking after things. And things were not better till the end. Jack was sick for 22 years, and I kept all that to myself. They showed me to come for a weekend, was okay. Made nice. And we went to New York, and we went to Europe. And one time when my Sid Mary died, it was very bad for me because I was with her all the time. And we were sitting, and my Freddie used to go to Israel every year. People that go to Florida, he would go to Israel every year. And he'd always ask us to come. So this time he says, you got to come with us. And we left right after we got off ship. We went to Israel, and we had a luxurious trip.
Who were you sitting Shiva for?
Eh?
You said you got up from Shiva.
Mary.
Oh, from Mary. Yeah.
Mary died 18 years back. This is the last trip we did. And we went to for a month. My children didn't know the job was that bad. So we were in Italy for a week. We were in Israel and all the luxurious places. It was so wonderful. We came back, everything was okay. Because I made up my mind not to broadcast the Jack was not well and all that. But he had somehow, I would say, when his mother died many years back, he became a Jew. He dropped everything. Shul was important. He would listen to shul, and he learned and he studied. And when he was going to shul, there was a lot of people that no one to say Kaddish for. He would take over, and he was for breakfast. He was the doer. He joined the Kadisha, and he did everything what a good Jew has to do. But he had Muslim. Nobody knew what the trouble was, but they never degraded them. They'd always make sure that these. And there was a husband back here in Ottawa. I don't know if you heard of it. He used to come and pick up Jack every morning to go to shul. I had to have him ready for 7 o'clock in the morning. Every morning. He would take him and bring him back, not only to the door, bring him upstairs. He gave him such cool that he had, and all the people in shul. But then, after a time, was very worn out, and I took a heart attack.
You did?
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was the year that he died, just a month before.
Mm-hmm. So that was what year did he die?
8 years back would have been 92, 93. And when I came back home, it was a very difficult time because I told Jack what happened was Sheila was here and we were sitting there. She said she's coming when I was in the hospital. But the day that I landed, the case she came here, it was very difficult because I wasn't doing too well. And then I was interned in the bedroom, like they always kept an eye on me. And then I came home, I wasn't doing too well.
You were in intensive care?
Yeah, for a long time. And then they brought me back to life. And when I got home, after a month, it's the first day we had a seder to Jack, sit with Jack. But nobody knew what a seder, what it was doing. It's all secret because I got away from my friends, got away from people that I used to go on the buses with Jack and just passing the time to keep him at peace because once you work them up, it's very hard to put them back. So the only way is to give in to their way, keep them as comfortable as possible, and this is the way it was. The first day that I was feeling better, so somebody was sitting with Jack, and I went outside, and I said to myself, what am I doing? Where am I going? So I said, I'll go into the old folks home. It was only 2 doors away. And I spoke to Joanna, and I said, the trouble I am in, and maybe it will be better if we go to home. And she talked to me, we talked to it and all that. And then Jack had an appointment in the afternoon. So I came back and we had lunch. And I said, we'll go to the doctor now. We go to Dr. Fireman, and he gives him a very good report. And we take the bus going home, and he passes out on the bus. He likes to sit where they have the 2 seats at the side. So he said, but he always liked candy. And I was giving him some candy, and all of a sudden I see him slump. And I said, this is not very natural. I'll take a look. And I see him in trouble right away. She started to scream and stopped the bus. And there was a woman, she was a nurse. She got him on the floor, she did everything. Anyway, we landed in the hospital. And I knew my troubles were. Anyway, I'm sitting around. What am I sitting around? So somebody said, you have to, we'll take you home. So we had a policeman took me home. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was in February, but it was still cold outside. And we go upstairs, and he says, do you have anybody to call? And all of a sudden, everything, I couldn't remember a thing. Because I could remember a telephone from everyone by heart. I didn't have to look at it. But I just couldn't. Anyway, he got me the telephone book. We started calling. And I called my oldest son in Winnipeg. He was there right at 11 o'clock at night. I was there. And all of a sudden, I had a house full of people. And everybody's looking for sheets hanging up and this and that. And where is this and where is that? And then Dorothy came over with her husband. Dorothy, come. We'll have to go and get a coffin.
Oh, he died. He actually died.
But that isn't.
He died on the bus. Yeah.
And from there, that's another story.
That was a shock.
And we got to buy the coffin. And I looked around. I've never been in a place like that. And I asked them, they got a white coffin. Because I belonged to Rhodesia all my life. And not that it meant for the holy people of the, I don't know. They don't have anymore. They don't have anymore. And I felt very hurt because I know there are white coffins in the city. Mrs. Wolfson came by early in the morning, the next morning, and she said, if you want anything, I'll go and get it for you. Is there anything I can do for you? And she said, did you get a coffin? I said, yes, but it's not what I wanted. I was looking for a white coffin. They don't have it. She said, they don't have it, but Robert Booker has them. Anyway, I called Robert Booker right away, and he said, they have to come and pick it up. So I called Charles Flavor, come get a white one and take the other one back. So there's a delay or what. Anyway, that was done. And people started to come in, food started to come in from all over. And it was such a party, set a table at every meal. It was such a young evening that came, people from all over talking about nothing that I don't know what they were talking about. It was a young, it was a holiday. Food was coming, you wouldn't believe it, flowers, the baskets and all that. And I thought the Chimishikans, what for? What for? And everybody was in the kitchen helping out. But it passed. And then it was an emptiness. And then there's another chapter in my life for sure. Where do you go? What do you do? Everybody went to their homes. They stayed down. They kept calling, but it's so you have to get up and do something about yourself. So I decided that nothing was worth doing anything. Yes, I was in the house and I would leave the house. So somebody must have called somebody in the city to come to interview me. Anyway, right away, my children, you're going to come live in Toronto. You're going to go to Baycrest, and there it's going to be wonderful and wonderful. We're out here and we will help you. Anyway, I went to Toronto. They interviewed me, everything was okay. The doctors send the papers there. Everything's good, I've got to wait. I've got to wait to get in. And then they let me know if I'd come there and live there for 2 weeks and see if I like it, or they would like me. We'll see. I did that. So anyway, one day, Sheila took me there, and we were there for the morning, and she was going to pick me up later. And when she came later and she went home with me, she nearly passed out herself. It was a little bit too much for her. So I said to myself, this cannot go on, coming and going. So the next morning, Marvin said he will take me. So we go in the elevator, and an elderly man comes in the elevator, and Marvin says, where are you going? And he says, I'm going to Baycrest. So before anyone can say anything, I said, you're going to Baycrest? Would you take me to Baycrest? And when you're going home, you take me home? I said, sure, why not? So right away, Marvin was very stunned by our approach, and I never seen it. And I said, well, I have to do something to spare Sheila because she could not go on like that. She had cancer operation not so long ago, before that. So I know she would not take me back and forth. Said to myself, that will not do, me living in Toronto. And she'll be going running back. She does not need it. I have to get that out of my mind. Anyway, I dated for 2 weeks. I'm still waiting for a call. Okay. And I came home, but somebody came from the city. I don't know who they are. I said, so what are you going to do? Stay in the house all day and all night? Why aren't you going out? Is anybody stopping this and that? So she says, I'd like you to try, where's that? Here in, there's a home. And
Where's the home?
I know where the home is. I forget the name.
Is it Central Park Lodge?
No, it's not a home. It's more like a clinic.
Oh, a clinic, yeah.
On Gig Street or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the psychogeriatric clinic. The psychogeriatric clinic?
Well, there's all kinds of things there.
Yeah.
She said, I want you to go there for the day. Anyway, it promised me go there. So I went there the first day with exercise and the talked. And I seen a lot of people come again, some worse than I am, some better than I am. And we said it was lunch hour. And I said, I'm going to wait till I go home. I had a big breakfast. I don't need all that. She said, why, you're kosher? I said, yes. She says, okay, we'll get your kosher meals. And they did. And that place has been a godsend to me.
It was a day program.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Through the...
But they have one of the most wonderful people looking after you. You would not believe. I was there for 3 months.
You came every day or you stayed for 3 months?
I know I stayed about 2 days a week.
You came 2 days a week?
Yeah.
Who brought you?
I went myself.
On the bus?
I went the bus and then I went through the market, so I had a good walk. And I was thinking a lot to myself, and I said, there are people. I'm not alone. And the one that they had was a very young girl. Her name was Frances. And she was the most giving lady I ever saw. And they had a social worker. They had a psychiatrist. And they did a lot for me. They told me life is worth living. You don't tell anybody anything. It's life for you now. And the children don't tell you anything. I didn't never wanted my children to. Anyway, I straightened up. And then all the children were gone from